We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. To keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
So good to be back. Thank you so much for joining me. It's Toward Anarchy. I'm Michael Storm. I miss you when you're gone. Well, I'm gone. You're always here. It's me. I'm the one that takes some time for myself. I apologize and mean to do that. I know it's not the right. We're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to be there for everybody else now. We're just supposed to constantly be there. Our time is supposed to be constantly given to other things, other causes, other people. No time for ourselves. No time to reflect. No time. No. It can be that way, right? It can feel like that sometimes, like it's just a bit of overwhelming and that there's just a little bit too much that you're expected to do for other people and you don't have the time for yourself. Well, take the time. It's okay. I did last week. I had to take some time to get caught up and because with the whole father-in-law thing with him falling and having to get him into rehab and get through that, and now the rehab here in the home and everything that's going on with nurses and occupational therapists and physical therapists and all this coming and going on top of all the other things, getting kids to go to college and arranging those documents and papers and looking for ways to actually make it happen, to find the money to do it, to get the support to do it. And there's just life. It's just that. And every once in a while you need to take a minute and straighten it out for yourself. And that's what I did. But I'm ready to be back. I'm ready to be back into this. And I'm back with a banger of an episode. You know, it's Saturday night. It's prime time. We are all around the world right here on the Republic Broadcasting Network, and I want to make it, as big and bad as we can possibly make it, right? Be as big and bad as we want to be, like Dennis Rodman might say. And to do so, I just have to be out there bringing you the best conversations, right? And I think I have one of those today. Tanawah Downing is my guest at the top of the hour, and if you don't know who he is, you will know who he is by the end of the show, and you will be a fan, I do believe. I don't think there's anybody across the network listening that will not be a fan of this man by the time they are done. If you haven't already heard of him, he's been doing this for a couple of years, the things that we're going to be talking about, and ultimately what he's doing, he's taking the law into his own hands. He's taking it directly to the highest law makers and lawgivers in each of the 50 states, and he is putting them on notice. And after he's done that, then it's on to the Supreme Court, and we'll get into the whole thing. He can explain it much better than I can, and trust me, I'm no dummy on this topic. It's one of the reasons that we wanted to have it. But he has actually been looking at the laws and filing the affidavits and learning the steps and creating the steps, as it were, in some cases, to be able to do these things, to be able to defend people from the state. He's a civil rights advocate and a litigator. And so he's really worked on some of the biggest cases and biggest troubles that we have in our court system over the last 10 years, last decade. He before that was into things from the other side, and he woke up one day. He saw it. He saw what happened, what he was doing, and that he was doing the wrong thing, and he couldn't look his children in the eye, that sort of thing, and suggest that he was doing right by himself as a man, by them as a family, as a patriot, as a God-loving, God-fearing man. All of these things we'll find out about. I'm telling you, everybody across the network, you are just going to love this conversation coming up at the top of the hour. Wherever you find us, hit that like button, whether it's Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok now, posting on there, and on Rumble, wherever you guys are doing, and the comic book reviews. Click the like on those too. They're exploding. They're huge. They're everywhere all of a sudden. It's amazing. It's caught up in a matter of weeks to, in some cases and in some places, the sort of reach that the show gets. It's been here for 5-6 years. So it's amazing what you can do when you touch on on pop culture and how you can reach people. And that was the whole exercise in talking about comic books and making it a point to read comic books each week, to be able to talk about them, not just speak about comic books in general, but to tell people what they can actually find in comic books specifically and review them. And at the same time, slowly, I've just begun to do this, slowly begin to slip in some of those other ideas as it becomes more natural to be able to slip in some of the other ideas that I'm talking about, the things that we talk about in the long form, the 2 hours here. And that's part of the reason that it's so popular so quickly and it's so easy, because it's easily digestible. We're talking about 2.5 to 5 minutes or so of me talking about something in pop culture. That's easy to sell people for a number of reasons. And so it's awesome. It's fantastic to be able to reach out to a new audience with a new thing without any particular intent on driving them here necessarily or turning them into anarchists. Like I have that notion that I'm doing that here. I'm just having conversations. I'm doing it in a proper, fantastic, encouraging space that is that Republic Broadcasting Network. While we're talking about it, support the network. Click that donate button over there at republicbroadcasting.org. Now would be one of the best times that you could help out. If you've ever been in a position where you can support somebody, where you could kick a few bucks to somebody for the things that they're doing and help them out, well, Republic Broadcasting, the people who are running the network itself, I'm a beneficiary of it, like yourself as a listener. I'm almost in the same way in that sense, because they require nothing of me, and I'm also not live anymore. I'm pre-recording. I still do the one-shot thing. There's no breaks, there's no edits, anything like that. It's just me turning on and watching the clock to fill the time. But that change itself has made it so that I'm not something that somebody has to be there manning the board for that live presentation. I'm that much easier. So I'm just kind of benefiting being on the network. I'm not necessarily a big stress to the network itself in the terms of the things that it has to do from 9 to 5 and running live shows. I become an easy part for them, but there's still so much about the network that needs to be done, that needs to be managed on a daily basis, and people need to be paid to do that, and it's because of you donating that they can get paid. And I guess things are really tight right now. I was just talking and there was there's just talk of, like there always is with everybody right now, right? Things are weird. The economy is weird. Money is weird. Everything is kind of up in the air, and it's almost like the fog of war, but I will get to this. It's almost like the fog of war, but it's not the fog of war. I assure you it's not the fog of war. But I'll come back to that. Support the network, republicbroadcasting.org. Click that donate button over there on the left-hand side so that we can have these conversations, so that you'll be able to hear what it is my guest has to say at the top of the hour that I assure you were going to want to hear, and you're going to want to get involved, I think. Many of you across the network, people who believe that you can affect change through the system, are really going to be behind what he's doing, and that's the sort of conversation that we can have because of your support for the network. 800-724-2719 if you want to talk to somebody about the different ways. Otherwise, you can send a check or a money order 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. Send that to RBN. Send that to Republic Broadcasting Network, and do what you've always done. Keep the voices going. Keep the conversation being had and the space for it to be had, because you're just amazing. Visit shoprbn.com. That's the win-win. You support the advertisers. They continue to advertise and put some dollars back into the network. Win-win. Total win-win. I've always believed that. I've always believed particularly radio, particularly effective in talking to people and getting people to listen and getting people to participate and to make some change and having the long conversation. That's one thing that we've always been able to do in radio and across the network. And again, I'm just a beneficiary of it, just like you are as a listener. I'm a beneficiary of the network and all of the hard work that is put into running the network on every single day, live shows, recorded shows, whatever it happens to be. TowardAnarchy.com to follow along. And as I was saying, just take that quick second to click that like button, Facebook, X, Instagram, wherever you're finding us. It just takes that quick second to tap that button with a thumbs up, whatever it is, whatever they call the like. And as always, follow along at TowardAnarchy.com. I ask nothing of you there except that if you want to, I don't know. I never use the email newsletter. I don't reach out to you guys very much. It's just, I guess it's obligatory that you're supposed to have a newsletter and you're supposed to constantly reach out and annoy people. I do that for 2 hours every week, and you have the opportunity to tune in. So I don't press the email newsletter thing, but it is definitely one way that if anything changes, if things are going on, stuff needs, for whatever, I can't imagine what that might be. Some major change to the show, perhaps, that's always a certain possibility where I might need to reach you. That'd be a way to do it. Fill out that email newsletter thing. Just drop your email address in there, and I won't bother you with it. I won't bother you with stuff. Every once in a while, I'll send you something. There's plenty to see there every week when you go to TowardAnarchy.com, and I don't want to spend a lot of time really bashing on this presidency, because there's not really any benefit to it. All that you do when you pick on the one side is embolden the other side, or that one side immediately assumes that you support the other side. And that's not the case here. There's nothing that's happening in government now under a Republican presidency that hasn't been attempted before, that tells me that there's going to be some fundamental change. They're even going back on some of the things that they've talked about already, some of the things that they sort of lured the sort of reasonable people, the libertarians, if you call them reasonable, into the fray and into the conversation, except that it's always a one-sided conversation because the winner is the state every time. The winner is the system every time. You want to talk about what we're that's what we're going to be on all the show today. Is just it's all going to be about how the state is. It's like I said just a minute ago. It's not the fog of war. There is no fog of war. There's no unknowns that we have going forward that keep us from going forward as a people. We just have people that dive in and they do what needs to be done, and they get things done for whatever their reasons are, and it works. And it works when there's no manipulation, when there's no third party in there trying to change the way we do things forcefully. So I'm not going to talk about Trump and his administration too much, but I am going to point out some things that are relevant and why they're relevant and why I think they're relevant in terms of what you can expect to see going forward through the rest of this presidency into the next presidency and presidencies beyond that, because that's what we're talking about when we're talking about what is happening now, what they're doing now, what manipulations in markets and in government and in society they're making now, and what they will produce going down the road, what will be the blowback to those things. That's a word that government people like a lot, and people who follow government like a lot. They like to use that phrase, blowback, because it adequately describes what happens when you do things a certain way and the response comes, and they try to make it like it's a fog of war thing, like they're going to do something that they don't know what's going to happen when they do it. When they talk about passing tariffs, they speak about them in terms of, well, we don't really know, or what they say is that they're going to it's going to make things better economically for some certain sector or for all of America, be the big claim at this point. But there's no reason to believe that that's true. We know that that's just a manipulation of market, and the way that the market reacts is it's going to adjust and it's going to pass off the cost to people. Whatever businesses are taxed, tariffed, whatever you want to call them, they eventually pass those costs off to other people. And I the last time we were here, I went through it a little bit. There's never enough time to talk about it by yourself when you're talking about this, especially when you don't just want to be this dry. That's what I found out of it when I was talking about it, about the tariffs and about what they do, the trickle-down effect, and how it works to cause prices to rise everywhere across the board. Because it is kind of economically dry, and that's why it's a study and it's an exercise in study is what it is. You're exercising your ability to study and to understand these things from the long term, from the greater consequence, the bigger picture, all of these different ideas that what we're doing now has such a great effect on how things play out down the road. And there's the idea that this kind of happens in a vacuum. It's weird. It's so hard for me to sit here and explain and to myself, let alone try to put into words things that I understand them, but I don't understand them because there's such an obvious blowback to what's being done, what's being said, what's being proposed, that why would you do that in the first place if you're thinking at long term at all? And so I gather then that most of these solutions, these things that we're talking about, these things that the president is doing, the things that presidents before him have done, they're all temporary, and that they're all part of this weird little game, and they know this. They know what's going to happen in the long term. There's no fog of war. In fact, that's exactly it. There's no fog of war. There's no confusion. It's political smoke and mirrors is what it is. So they're telling you that they're going to make America better forever. That was something that the president was talking about in his address to Congress here the other day, that we're never going to go back. We're never going to let that happen again. But how can that be when you're temporary? You are temporary. All of these things that you are doing politically is temporary. It completely changes over and over again. I read a fantastic comic book this week, and I'll tell you, I'm going to tell you about two of them. I want to tell you about this one because it is, in particular, a reference or a good view of what it is that we have when we talk about government and populist candidates and their effect on things. And really, both of the main books that I read this week had really good references to these things, really good examples of these things. So I read this book called Blade Forger. It's by a couple of guys, the Miranda brothers. I didn't know who these guys were. Hadn't seen anything that they'd done before. They wrote and did the artwork for it. And this story, the Blade Forger story, it's about this society. It's like a post-apocalyptic type of society. They tell you that what has happened is that they found this new source of energy called Corum. And so they fight a war for control over it. It's a world war for control over it. And generations, who knows? We don't know how long. There seems to be a sort of a post-apocalyptic appearance to everything. Like this has been going on for a long, long time. And so this world war, they finally decide that they're going to come together, and it's going to be a one world government, and that everybody's going to get under one banner, and that's so that nobody controls this new energy source. And so how they decide to do this is they're going to set up an emperor who answers to the people, whatever, because it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing to suggest that we can do this. You're familiar with stories like this already. There are all sorts of them. What is it, the Mockingjay, those series, the District 13, all that stuff. Where you have these competitions for leadership or for benefit of your people. Well, in this case, it's the whole world is behind the latest adventurer to be chosen to go and face the current leader in this blade battle, this battle it's called the Battle of the Five Rings, and they ultimately have to forge their blades, their weapons, and they have to fight it out, and they have to beat the last guy that was in charge. And what happens is that the people, they all get behind this newcomer. He's their hero. They support him, they help him, they give him the tools to make sure that he makes it safely to the competition, and he wins the competition, he defeats the current tyrant, and so we don't really have a concept of how long this has been going on, but the futility of it all is evident in it if you have any sort of global view. If you're not just reading it as a story and just in taking the input, the entertainment of it all. If you have a global view of it all, you see that this Owada, he's the new champion. He jumps in there, he wins, he wins the battle, he takes over, and all the people cheer it. He was the populist candidate. They loved it. And he did it. He's going to make everything better, and the new emperor, everybody cheers, the big orange guy, whatever it is, whoever it is. But you jump forward 40 years, and they're tearing down Owada's statue and calling him a fascist. And he's demon eyes now, and he's old, and he's withered, but he's still strong, and he's still keeping the power, and it's the story of the ring, the J.R.R. Tolkien's story of the ring and the control and the power, and it's just a story that it's too much. That's what all these stories are about. It's too much. It's too much to suggest that you can control everyone, and it's far too much to suggest that you can set up a system of control over anyone and that it be fair and equitable and balanced and judicious and all of the things that we claim that democracy is supposed to be. And what it really turns into is exactly what's happened in the Blade Forger comic, where these people are 1 minute they're all cheering for him, they all want him, he's the champion, it's going to be perfect, he's going to solve everything, and next minute it's been 4 years later, it's been 6 years later, it's been 8 years later, it's been 40 years later. What the hell difference does it make how long it's been later when nothing has changed? We didn't get anything out of it. The only ones that are surviving and thriving are the politicians, and they're doing it on our dime. We're the ones that put them there. How is it that the population of voting people is ever going to choose someone to rule them properly when they can't rule themselves properly individually? At least that's the claim of a government. That's why you have a government, right? You have to set up a government to control the people because they're not capable of controlling themselves. This is the important. So as I was saying, I can drop in some of these points in these conversations now when I'm reaching people through talking about these comic books. And it's a way for me to be sure to be able to keep doing the show every week. If my bills are paid, I don't ever have to worry about what I do here, what I do in my spare time, what I'm doing with my political time, my social time, my fun time. That's what this is. This is, like I said, I miss you guys when I'm not here. I like being able to come here and chat every week at you. It's not with you, but I don't need it to be with you, and you don't need it to be with me. You can argue with the radio. You can argue back at and it'll solve exactly as much as it would if you argued with me directly. Things would resolve exactly the same way because it's highly unlikely I'm going to be talking about something that you would be able to convince me otherwise. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking about it. One more thing. All about Star Wars for me. Every time I turn around, certainly over the last week, I suppose, along with all the other titles I've been reading, there was a new Star Wars title this week. It's called Jedi Knights. They're celebrating the 10 years of returning to under the Marvel heading, the Marvel banner there. And that's when I jumped back into comics. That's the long story short. And I've been back ever since and playing ball and enjoying the Star Wars books and trying to enjoy them as much as I can. I'm not even going to comment on the Kathleen Kennedy thing because is she gone? Is she leaving? Who knows? Nobody knows. Nobody. And you know what? Okay, here's my one comment on the Kathleen Kennedy thing. It takes more than one person to ruin a legacy, to bring down an empire. Now, I know you believe, many of you believe that Donald Trump is that one person that's going to bring down this empire, and I assure you, as an anarchist, as a student of history, as somebody who's been watching and learning for a long time now about these things, it took more than just him to get us to this point, and it will take more than just him. It will take, as it always does and always the case, it's not the leaders, it's the followers that are the real problem. It's the people who give them the power. He can't do anything by himself. He needs other people to do it. And that's my one statement about Kathleen Kennedy and her influence on the Star Wars empire and its waning. We'll see if it's able to recover. We'll see if it's able to keep going in certain places. It's certainly doing fine in the comic books. Written by Mark Guggenheim and art by Madabek Muzbekov. Huh? Yeah, maybe? All right. Star Wars Jedi Knights. We meet Vecna Mooncrest. It's a first appearance. There's keywords there, yes. People love that word, that phrase. But the Ki-Adi-Mundi's running around. Yoda, Mace Windu. They're on peace negotiations, and these peace negotiations have broken down. They're on Syrinx Prime, and Obi-Wan is a Padawan at this point. He's running around in there as well. So we know this is all pre-Clone Wars. It's the Age of the Republic era. The people on Syrinx Prime are in an ancient grudge with the people of Vakura, and what are the Jedi's going to do? They're peacekeepers, right? There's peace and justice throughout the galaxy. That's what they stand for. So Qui-Gon and another first appearance, Baram Khana, they're over talking to the people of Akura, and they finally figure everything out, and they get it all set up. But while there's a story. I'm not going to tell you the story of how they bring about peace, because that just kind of ruins the whole story. But there's something more important that happens while Qui-Gon and Barem are on what the heck was it again? Vakura, yeah. When they're on Vakura, there's a bunch of back and forth and a bunch of split panels, and they literally are jumping back one sentence back and forth between conversations as Yoda is talking to one guy and Qui-Gon's talking to the other guy. At any rate, Qui-Gon in particular is attacked, and there's a mystery set up. And it's unrelated to the peace mission. That's what we find out by the end of the book. So I'm excited, and anybody who is a fan of the Jedi Knights, the whole peace and order throughout the galaxy thing, is going to love this. They're all in there. The whole Jedi Council is running around and checking in, and you see new names and new faces. I think there's at least 3 new first appearances in that book, so that may be something. I know there are people out there that speculate and they buy these things because they expect them to be popular. We'll see where this new stuff is going for Star Wars. There's a new Star Wars main title due out in May, and I'm looking forward to that. The Jedi Knights, it's on your local comic shop shelves right now. If you don't have one of those, reach out to me at AmazingFantasies.com. I will take care of you. We have about 250,000 books in the store. We do free pulls. You actually get a discount, 20% or more free pulls there on the new comic books, and tens of thousands of back issues there that you can browse through starting at $2 or less. It actually goes down from there. We have some high-end books in the store. We have some really nice high-end books in the store, and they change and are coming and going all the time, and that's fine. But we have all that filler stuff, all those little issues that you're missing, the obnoxious ones that you don't want to have to pay the $5-10 for. Real potential there at $2 or less, and in good condition with a bag and board. That's the way we do business. AmazingFantasies.com, or stop in the store if you're ever in Topeka, Kansas. It's really only a matter of time until somebody actually walks into the store and says, "Hey, I heard one of your reviews. I saw one of your reviews and heard about the shop." And I'm waiting for that day. It's going to happen very soon now. We already have people doing it the other way around, reaching me through the show, knowing about the comic book shop. So it's going to happen the other way around. Just again, you saw right there exactly what I was talking about when I was talking about people point at this presidency or that president, and they say, he's going to bring down the nation. Again, like I just got through saying, it's not him. It's all the people who follow him. It's all those people standing there in that room and cheering when he was having that conversation with Congress. But not even them. It's all of the people at home, on the social media, on their computers, on their couches, wherever they're at, in their jobs, that are cheering him and making every excuse for it. The terrorist thing, they always point to another president and say some other president did it. Any of these things that, like the executive orders. Trump has passed more than 100 executive orders and taken nearly 500 executive actions of one kind or another. At least that's what he's going around bragging about anyway. Those orders, those things, everybody just points at the previous guy and says, well, Obama did it, or Clinton did it, or Bush did it, or whoever did it. They said, this guy did it, that guy did it. And that's not a solution. That's not an excuse. That's not a reasonable answer. That's dismissing the point. It's completely ignoring what we're trying to talk about and suggesting that whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is, that whatever it is validated because the previous guy did it. We're going to have some more about that conversation in terms of the state coming up here at the top of the hour when Tanawah Downing joins me, because that's exactly what happens. They set within our judicial system, that's what we're going to be talking about, within our judicial judicial system, they set precedent, and they have stare decisis, and all of these different things that allow them, all these different manipulations that allow them to say whatever they want about the law, do whatever they want about justice, instead of following the procedures like we have, instead of taking the steps. And it's the same. It dismisses the claim that what they're doing is going to work, that it's problematic, that that you shouldn't do it because of reason A, B, C, D, E, F, G, the long list of reasons you shouldn't do it, and it's being justified because the previous guy did it. Do you not see where that could be a problem with the idea of power and the idea of handing power from one person to the next on a whim, on some magical thing called a vote, and just suggesting that we all just have to go along with it in the end? You could see where that might be a problem, right? And then when they're talking about any one of these things that these people are doing, that these people in office, if you're going to talk about Donald Trump specifically and what he's doing in the office with the passing of the tariffs, and it just, the reaction from the left is so much hatred, and it's so violent. It's such a violent rhetoric, and it's like nothing I've ever seen before. It is a ratcheting up of the violence that has been it's been going on for 4 or 5 years now. It's 2020 and through COVID and all that happened, and the unrest and the lockdowns and everything that came out of that. I think it's an extension of that, and it's not going to stop that. There was a big jump, a big ratcheting up. I talked about it a lot at the time, explained exactly what was happening, explained that this was where we were headed. People, I never say anything like that to suggest that I have some knowledge or some information that other people don't. In fact, I have, as much information or less than just about anybody else. That's the reality of it. And I don't say that I'm right. I don't question whether whether I'm right or wrong about it. I question whether the evidence is right or wrong, and what evidence I have at hand is what's right or what's wrong. And I think that's a good way to try to approach things if you want to be honest, if you want to try to find the truth of something and to be able to speak truth to people. That's what I try to do each week. And there's this violent rhetoric from the left, but there's a blind ignorance on the part of the right that just assumes that this is going to happen, that it's all going to work out. The TDS is real, but so is the TWS, the Trump worship syndrome. It's real bad. It's where these people were. So people were reasonable before. They're suddenly not reasonable anymore because they've been emboldened by the populist candidate. They've been emboldened by his taking the office. And so now they believe they're right with only half of the information. And that's an interesting topic in and of itself. And I shared a link up there. If you go to towardanarchy.com, you look for 2509, that's the episode. We got Tanawah Downing coming up at the top of the hour. You don't want to miss this conversation. But scroll down there to the Anarchist Audit. And it's the last link in the Anarchist Audit, in fact, and it questions why do people think they're right about something when they only have half of the information, and is that actually a good thing? There's a recent study that looked at people who assume they're right and why they might think they're right. It's a small study, but it's an interesting study with some interesting implications because it presented the data that they're talking about in a sort of binary presentation. there was no, it's like democracy itself. These are your choices. We either do it the way these guys say we're doing it, or we do it the way these guys say we're doing it, when in fact, it's actually both of them doing something together in conjunction that is making things work. And that's what they sort of lay out in this little study here, and there's some interesting findings in it that point back to that blind ignorance and excuse me, that exists right now on the part of the right. It's like all of a sudden they've forgotten that it's still government, that it's still socialist, that it's still a bunch of people who are meddlers, manipulators, people, do-gooders. At best, they're do-gooders. They're the people who just want to interfere and make things a little better for everybody else, except that that thing's not for everybody else. Nothing is for everybody else. Everything is for everybody when they choose what they want to do, and when they're not violating other people or other property, and then we have no problems, and we don't have societal ills on the level that we do today. Those ills, they're reduced to actual problems. There's no excuse about society as being the problem, about a general sense of society being a problem, or the direction that society is headed is a problem, because that comes from the manipulation. That's a result of the manipulation. If you see the way that everything pulls away from government in terms of what they control, look at the marriage thing and the control over relationships that government has classically had in a very real way, and how it has perverted relationships, because government has said that in the past that things are a certain way, and they're doing it again, things are a certain way, and that they have to be this certain way, and that they can't exist outside of the paradigm that we've set up for you. It created a schism within the society. It creates a schism within the people themselves, who still have, quote, normal relationships with other people of the other sex, whatever, normal, healthy relationships that produce offspring, that when the people stay together produces great families and solid family units, and we have a basis for caring for each other, and all the things that come along with stability in the home and in relationships. And government forcing the ideas of what relationships could be and what a home should be is what helps create the schism. And if you want proof of it, I can show it to you in comic books. I can show you how they've been talking about the same damn social problems since before my time in relation to government manipulations over information, over markets, over relationships, over everything that government, everything that the great orange wonder has jumped up there and said that he's going to do for everybody. All of these changes, these manipulations, these executive orders, these things that he's doing to force people to do things the way he wants them to do, and then he wants to take as much of it as he can and make them into law so that they can't be changed, like I was talking about initially there, by the next person coming through. But that's just not the case, because he sits there in his address to the Congress here, and he says how we're never going to let that happen again. The only idea that words like that support is an idea of dictatorship, is an idea, and not just the Roman name for dictator, the actual sort of resulting guy that doesn't give up the power, the system that has allowed the guy to justify his way into, to executive order his way into staying in power longer than he should. 40 years, 4 years, 8 years, 3 terms. I don't know what it is. There's no magical number. There's no magical formula, and that's what I was trying to say when I was talking about the Star Wars book. and Kathleen Kennedy, and the idea that she is not what destroyed Star Wars. She's been the head of it, the face of it, but she's not what destroyed it. She's not the one. She can dictate everything that she wants to people, but somebody has to do it. Somebody has to follow through on it. It's the same with Donald Trump. It's the same with him. But we get closer and closer every time one of him gets up there and starts saying, well, what I can do is, I don't need the Congress is, what I can do signing this is, and you will do it, and I will make it a law, and we will never go back to the way things were before. That's dangerous rhetoric. That's the type of rhetoric, that's the type of government manipulation and interference that drives pushback, that drives the ratcheting up. And it's equal from both sides. They both do it because you have to have an equal or greater response to push back the next time. And that's why it ratchets up. It's not going to last forever. It's all going to pop eventually. 90,000 factories that we lost are going to come back. That's economic myth. That's manipulating reality. They got sent there from manipulating reality the last time. Trump is right about one thing when he says, though, that the left will never be happy about it. And I give you a really good example, and this is why I said I don't want to really bash this presidency per se. They're all useless. They're all worthless, all presidents. With the best of intentions, they're all still dangerous, and they lead something, they head up something, they have too much power, it's too big, and we're too small and we're too unimportant as individuals to that giant thing, and that's a serious problem. But he's never going to make people happy on the left. And you know that I don't have any delusion about how this ends up historically, but it's the kind of nonsense that you get from this local rag here, KSNT News, the local web rag version of it anyway. It's a news station. It's a television news station, but they do, stories on the web and AP stuff, things like that. Not a lot of actual reporting of their own, just a lot of parroting the crap that has been reported in other places around the nation. And that's a problem with local news across the board anyway. But what they've done is they've taken this view that no savings is expected from nearly 40% of Doge's canceled contracts. And this is an Associated Press article, but it's posted in the local KSNT. So they're just furthering a particular narrative. And that narrative is that 60% of cuts isn't good enough to get back, to save from 60% of the things that they are cutting is not a good thing. That they're concentrating on the fact that the 40% that's not going to work instead of the 60% that's going to work. There's problems with that whole thing across the board. That's the whole idea of good enough. That's the whole idea of you're voting to make change instead of actually getting up and going and making the change. And it's the sort of thing that creates the necessary division that ensures that centralized authority, that the system itself will continue to exist regardless of who is in power. And that what happens is that ratcheting up, and that the system becomes more and more powerful because it has to become more and more powerful to protect itself. And it protects itself because it claims it's protecting you, and you'll go ahead and go out there and vote for it as soon as they put on the right wig, the right mask, the right costume to make you stand up and say, well, God damn it, now I'm a patriot. That's right, because that's the way we should be doing things. This doesn't work. It has never worked in the history of mankind, and it's not going to start working now all of a sudden when you start ignoring the economics of things. That was the whole point of it with the 90K factories coming. That's an economic... It's an economic manipulation. It means that you're going to manipulate manipulation, and you're not even addressing the problem that caused the problem in the first place. The high taxes, the regulations. He talks about going to eliminate 10 regulations for every new one that they that they enact. How about don't enact any of them? How about don't enact any new regulations? How about just looking at slashing? How about just looking at getting rid of the barriers to life that government is from across the board, whether it's our individual health, whether it's our economy, whether it's our businesses, whatever it is, get them the hell out of it at every single, because then there's no room for them anymore. Then they're gone. Then there's nothing that sustains them. And so what do? You come in for your short term, for the time that you're in there, you slash, you burn, you chase everybody out that's a bad egg by your definition of a bad egg. Literally still doing the same things that the bad eggs are doing, but you're doing it for the right reasons. Nixon quotes here. The right reasons. That's what you're doing. And so you justify it, and you continue to justify it, and nothing changes. We can look at the economy. The employment numbers are up for February. They added about 25,000 or so more jobs than the average economist idiot. Sorry, I repeated myself. It says that they're going to add, which we know means that they're off by probably 60,000 jobs, or maybe even as many as 100,000. And it's funny because if you read the article that I provided, they actually talk in there about a particular group of economists predicting only 25,000 jobs for the month of February. Well, we know that they're going to adjust all of these numbers, and we know just from the fact that the president himself has cut tens of thousands of jobs, supposedly. I guess many of them don't actually take effect until September. It's all just a game. It's all just smoke and mirrors. It's going to look really good on paper, as often as they can make it look really good on paper. But out here on the ground, nothing is changing. Nothing is changing because they're not going to stop taking the money from us. They say they're going to give us back dividends. Dividends are something that you get back when you've invested in something and that investment is paying off. Well, we didn't invest. We were robbed, and that money was spent. That money is gone as it is, so you had to get it from somewhere else. You produce nothing. You make nothing. The government doesn't create anything, so where does it get its wealth from? It either prints it or it takes it from someplace else, some other productive space, whatever it is. If it forces, you might think it's a good idea to force foreigners to pay for us. Do you get how small America is to the rest of the world? Do you understand that there's not a limit on the way they can raise prices, on the way they can sell something over there, on the way they can raise taxes, on the way they can make us pay for all of these manipulations that they're doing? And it's just so obvious. It's so obvious. And it's a bit silly because you continue to just get the lies. And you can just look and see that the lies are lies. All you have to do is just, but then I guess that's what happens, that you're left and you're right and they're wrong. And that's all it is. And you only have half the information because you're not even listening to the other side. You're not even paying attention. You just go with the flow. You're powerful when you're in power, and you're a victim when you're not in power. And nobody, none of the people that are honest about this stuff are even participating in it. So what we get as we continue the ratcheting up and the pullback, the pushback of government to its own initiatives to make government better. Wow, it's such a circular thing. Boy, I'm going to give myself a headache just even thinking about it. It's just so bad when you can just look at every single aspect of something that's happening and go, okay, well, that's great, but what's it do for us? The two genders thing, that's been a big thing. Okay, what does two genders mean, though? Two genders is meaningless to everybody that's a person because they either already know that they are the gender that they are, or they don't believe that there are two genders. So there's no advantage to making a statement as a politician, as America, and taking a position that there are only two genders. There's no value in doing it. There's no value in government doing it. It's just making a political statement that's going to cause a greater schism and a greater division in between the people, because they've already accepted one position or the other. They don't need government to do it for them. What they need government to do is slash the goddamn programs that take the money that gets spent to give somebody, anybody, I don't care who it is, it doesn't matter, some surgery that is optional, that is morally questionable, is anything other than necessary, and that I should have to pay for it. And anyway, even if it's only pennies that actually come out of my pocket, or if it's even no money that really ever comes out of my pocket, just the notion that at some point, if I did have enough money, that they could take it from me and give it to somebody else. And he reads off this list the other day. He's going over these different things about the dollars that they're saving us, 60 million on this, 22 billion on that, 45 million on this, and it's 8 million on gay sex education in Africa in some little place. It's all these very nitpicking specific little things like that he would really comment on, that I noticed when he was talking about it. And that to me tells me exactly what I'm saying here is true, that there's this push to make it appear as if government is doing this great and wonderful thing. I'm talking to you on the right now, that it's doing all these great and wonderful things, but you're not looking at the long term. You're not looking at what is actually going to benefit you as an American, to benefit us, to make us freer as people, to do what we need to do to survive as a human race, and to continue to exist and do what we want to do on a day-to-day basis, without somebody coming in constantly and telling us that it has to be done another way, that it has to be done their way for their specific reasons. When do I get to see the so-called conservatives in this nation, the so-called libertarians in this nation, stop submitting to the system? Stop compromising. Stop suggesting that there is a compromise on freedom, that you can have a little bit of slavery. It's as possible as being just a little bit pregnant, right? A little bit of slavery is acceptable, especially when you call it taxation. When you give it a fancy name, when you call it something other than what it actually is, you use a wonderful euphemism. Government is fantastic about that. Let's make America affordable again. How are you going to do that? What is it that you're going to do that makes America affordable again by forcing people to pay more for products? Short term, that's how you get away with it. You get a short-term appearance, you get an ignorant population, you get a whole bunch of people that aren't paying attention on top of the ignorant population. The ignorant population are you people that actually vote, the morons that actually think that this stuff works. You're the ignorant people in this scenario, because you keep showing up at the polls and you keep voting, and we keep going back and forth while the economy continues to go down, while society continues to degrade and degenerate. I don't know what to tell you anymore than it's your fault, because you're the ones that empower government, because if you didn't empower government, they would actually have to force all of us to abide by what they want us to abide by. And that would, of course, expose them for what they truly are. They're exposed every single day and in every single way in this matter, but you have to be paying attention to it. You have to really be watching. You can't just be a normal person with even just a rudimentary understanding of what happens in our political system. And that's what most people get, if they get anything of understanding about our political system, by the time they get out of these compromised schools. And you talk about the banning books. That was another big topic. This is the same for any of these parties. It doesn't matter on what side. Ban books. All right, we don't ban books. We don't ban ideas. That's not how we do things. We let people choose for themselves. That's what a free society is for. And ideas aren't actions. That's the way our society is supposed to be. That's what common law is supposed to be. That's what our justice system is supposed to be. Whatever weird amalgamation of common law and Roman law and English barrister law and it just all these things mixed together that it's become. What we're talking about is not violating other people, not violating other people's property, and what we're not doing when we're talking about all these things that government is doing is we're not talking about striking at the root, right? We're not talking about getting to the root cause or the root problem, and that's going to be my contention. That's going to be my problem with this system, with this current administration, with the next administration, as it continues to get worse. You mark my words, it does not get better from here. And I'm not talking about your view from your itty-bitty little Overton window that you let these fools manipulate and show you only what they want you to see. I'm talking about the whole picture. I'm talking about the things that are going to continue to happen, the ratcheting up, the falling out, the people just not caring anymore and not giving a damn and just taking what they want. There's so much of that happening right now, and the only response to that, without rolling back and without giving people a sense of safety again in terms of their own reality and their own existence, because government's not encroaching upon them, government's not taking everything from them, is to ratchet the government up and take everything from them and make them do what you want them to do. And it just doesn't work. It can't work. It won't work. It never has. We got to get to the top of the hour. We got to get to this conversation. Tanawah Downing is my guest, and he'll be here with us. So just stick around. We'll be right back on Toward.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy. You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared of losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street, and there's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. The air is unfit to breathe. Our food is unfit to eat. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. My life has value.
Here we go, off into hour number 2, towardanarchy.com to follow along as always. And when you get there, you will find that I've been looking forward to having this conversation. This is something that is important to me. My guest is the national civil rights advocate and litigator, and he's been involved in some of the biggest civil rights cases in American history. And I don't want to assume anything. Let's see, because we hooked up through the pod match system here, and I've told you guys about the pod match system before. It's a fantastic little thing. I've talked to so many wonderful, great people coming through this pod match system, and I'm proud to talk about it. I don't pay for it. They don't pay me to do anything. I just use the free service, and I find it very useful. Even though I have a lot of people that are wanting to be on the show at any time, it's just a great resource that's outside my normal circle of people people that I might talk to, and I might find things to talk to people about. So when someone reaches out to me, Tanawah, your career here just seems fantastic, and it seems like for the last couple of years you've been on this path of going around the states trying to break down barriers to bring real justice to people who've been violated by our paid, bought off, out of control justice system. And so when somebody reaches out to me and says, hey, let's talk about something real and not just political, not just, social and fun, or let's talk about a real thing, I got to jump on it and I got to get in there, because I have my a very specific view of our laws and the way our system is supposed to work. And frankly, my view says that right now everything is completely turned on its ear. It's upside down. It's completely backwards. Justice is for the system. It's not for the people. Even when it seeks justice for individuals, it gets its justice first. It gets its 7 pounds of flesh or whatever first out of the thing. So I'm really excited to get a chance to talk with you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me speak to your audience, because you're absolutely right. Everything is upside down. It is backwards. And, the heart of my litigation is addressing this because, we live in a society where we believe the Constitution of the United States of America, that's the foundation and that everything must derive from it. But I'm telling you right now, the Constitution is the opposite of what we follow. Because if you walk into a courtroom today and you say, hey, my rights have been violated, where does that judge go to determine whether or not your rights have been violated? Do they go to the object to which their fidelity is bound, the Constitution of the United States, or do they go to a judge-made ruling made from the flawed decision of the man that came before them, or the flawed decision of the man that came before him, or better yet, the slave owner that came before him, right? They don't go to the Constitution to determine if your rights have been violated. They go to case law. And you know what? Case law isn't even law, because judges here in America have no authority whatsoever to create law. That's the separation of powers issue. All legislative powers vested in Congress of the United States consist of the Senate and House of Representatives. That's Clause 1, Article 1. So when the judicial branch does create a ruling and then calls it law, well, that would be unconstitutional. And what we've got to do right now is we've got to remove these flawed decisions of judges that were erroneously called law, because judges have no authority to create law. Case law has no place within American jurisprudence. We need to remove what they put into place, put back into place the foundation, the Constitution of the United States of America. And when we do, then we're going to finally see the justice that we're looking for. We're going to finally see a system that's going to be working on behalf of people in the United States, because the laws were created to protect us. They weren't created to protect them. So when the slave owner becomes takes those laws and then changes it fundamentally through their rulings, well, we can see why we're in a situation today where the slavery institution certainly is absolutely at work and underway here in America, undermining the laws of the United States and enslaving every single man, woman, child here in America. So the legislation that I have, or litigation I have, is specifically focused on justice issue. Judges don't create law. We're going to remove that. We're going to put back in its foundation the Constitution of the United States of America. We're going to see what direction that takes us, because I can say that right now, today, the direction we're heading is not the direction that the American people ever envisioned, ever agreed to, and certainly isn't the direction that they want to go any longer.
No, that's perfectly fair, and I think that's a great introduction to what we're going to be talking about. Tanawah Downing. Now, if you liked what you just heard there, you can follow up on this after our conversation at Tanawah's website. We'll have to spell it for you, right? Just because the way we're saying it may not be, but it wasn't the way I thought it would be, and it's an interesting story. Maybe we'll get into. We have a lot to talk about it. Who knows where we'll end up really going with it? But www.tanawah, and yeah, many people may believe that that's exactly what they're saying, and it's a .com, TANAWAH.com, and of course the link will be there at towardanarchy.com. So are you still going around on this tour right now? Is that what's happening? Are you actively doing this tour thing that's talked about here on the page?
We are. You see, what has to happen is we have to provide notice to all of these agents across this country. So we're in Rhode Island at the moment. We're on our way up to Maine. We hope to be there tomorrow. There's 3 states up the Northeast that we didn't get served on the first time around: Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire. We got to get them served, because what we're doing is we are pointing out crimes that are being committed by agents of our government, right? So I'm providing a notice to the highest executive and the highest judicial officer within these states. So the Attorney General of the state, as well as also the state Supreme Court. We're providing notice through one of their agents that, hey, your agents, your prosecutors across the state are all acting criminally. They're acting in violation of the oath that they took, violating the Constitution of the United States, the obligations that they have, and thus depriving people of rights guaranteed by the Constitution. Now, what's happening is this, all right? We know that the overarching laws or requirements for every state to follow is codified in that Constitution of the United States, right? We know that those are the requirements every state must follow. Therefore, when a state fails to follow the very simple, basic procedures and processes codified in the Constitution of the United States for the adjudication of crime, we know that that's going to be unconstitutional. And today, what's going on is that there are, well, let me take a step back, okay? So the primary respondent in our litigation is the state of Washington. They're the primary respondent. So Clause 1 of Amendment 5, certainly part of the Constitution, right? It's part of the Bill of Rights. It was adopted and ratified as such on December 15th, 1791. In all intents and purposes, the people of the United States put that in place, the Bill of Rights, so it's part of the Constitution. I don't think that anyone is going to argue the validity of the Fifth Amendment. But what the Fifth Amendment says, it says no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury. Now, that's clear. You got to have an indictment by a grand jury before arresting someone and holding them over for a capital or an infamous crime. Now, a capital crime is any crime punishable by death, right? That's pretty easy. But an infamous crime is a little bit more. We got to step in. We got to look a little bit deeper. An infamous crime is defined by Title 18, subsection 4083 as any crime punishable by more than 1 year imprisonment in a penitentiary. So if you get more than 1 year as a punishment, that is an infamous crime. Now, it's not the amount of time that you get sentenced to, but the amount of time you can be sentenced to that triggers the infamous nature. So just because you get 3 months doesn't mean that when you were arrested and held over that it wasn't infamous, because you could have gotten more than a year, right? So it's not the amount of time you get sentenced to, but the amount of time you can be sentenced to that creates the infamous nature. So any crime punishable by more than 1 year imprisonment, if you can get a year and a day, that is an infamous crime. Therefore, the Constitution of the United States of America, Clause 1 of Amendment 5 says you must have an indictment by a grand jury before arresting someone and holding them over for that infamous crime, right? That's what the Constitution dictates. Now, the state of Washington, Article 1, Section 26, again, the state of Washington is the primary respondent. We are against them. If we can beat the state of Washington, we will beat all the states. But Article 1, Section 26 of the Washington State's Constitution says, no grand jury shall be drawn or summoned in any county. So now we have an inferior state constitutional provision that functions directly to the contrary of the United States Constitution. And what that means is that in the history of the state of Washington, they have never convicted a person legally and lawfully consistent with the procedures and processes established and codified in the Constitution of the United States. That means that every single one of their judgments are all void, wholly without force or effect, because every one of those judgments derived from an unconstitutional act committed by the state when they chose to forego the Constitution of the United States and go their own direction. Now, when I started this litigation 9 years ago, I thought it was somewhat isolated. I had no idea how big this was going to be. Right. Because it's actually 13 states across the country that do not conduct a grand jury, including the state of Connecticut, state of Michigan, state of Pennsylvania, state of Oklahoma, state of Washington. These are states that are acting in direct, willful defiance of laws of the United States, Constitution of the United States. And it's not just them. Then you have another 28 states that permit their prosecuting attorney to charge by information or indictment by their discretion. Right, such as Article 2, Section 17 of the Oklahoma State Constitution, which says that the prosecuting attorney can charge by information or indictment by their discretion. Unfortunately, what that particular provision is, when you permit a prosecuting attorney or an agent of the state to be able to determine who has the constitutional right and who does not, as written, that is a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. You can never permit your agents to be able to pick and choose who has the right and who does not without violating the So now we have more than 700,000 people across America that are in prison illegally and unconstitutionally on direct facial constitutional violations, meaning that their convictions are void, wholly without force or effect. And what we're seeking to do is we're going to change the perspective of how we see criminals here in America, because we cannot continue to operate under this presumption that we call China and Korea uncivilized because they take their own people, put them into abusive, oppressive conditions. So they make T-shirts and sweatshirts for 30 cents an hour under an institution that they call sweatshop, but we call prison. That's not prison. That's slavery. And we need the American people to understand that is the true roots, the nature of the system is an opportunity to be able to enslave every man, woman, child of our country. And we're not going to permit this any longer. So that's the heart of our litigation.
Okay. No, I think that's great. And I think it's core. I think it's obvious. And I think that it blows my mind that you can sit there and say that there are 13 states that just don't follow the Constitution so directly. There are so many other ways that the Constitution isn't followed throughout our system, but that's just so blatantly obvious, and it's such a... Okay, so here's the question. A couple of them, just to follow up on that. When do you think this begins, where the people lose their standing as people and they become citizens, they become wards of the state, they become subject to interpretation instead of natural right?
So let's look at it like this, okay? Our founders and forefathers who started our country, they started what was known as the egalitarianism form of government, which believes that all men are equal. That's what they believed in. Right? At least that's what they said. And so the problem that we have is that we're not looking at the actual actions of those founders and forefathers. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, when they made an egalitarianism form of government, they failed to release what they called their property. So they didn't start a criminal justice system because it's not built upon the just principles of all men being equal. It's actually the criminal enslavement system because slavery is and has always been the foundation of American jurisprudence. Justice is simply a term that's created by slave owners in order to preserve and protect their property. And we need to be honest about this, right? Because they have been leading us to dissolution from the very beginning because they didn't do what was necessary in order to create a just system, right? They kept their slaves. And a lot of people say to me, they're like, yeah, but they didn't see them as equal. They didn't see them as people. And I'm going to say, I'm not going to buy into that. I'm not going to subscribe to that. And I'm not going to permit that to be an excuse because unfortunately for them, all three of them, when they died, in their will, they released those slaves. They set them free. So if they did see them as just property, they would have just sent them down, inherited by their grandchildren, and they would just let them go as though they were property. Sure. But the fact that they kept them until the day that they could no longer profit off of them leads me to say I'm not going to buy into that. I'm not going to accept that as an excuse. No, they saw these people as equal, but they saw them as a means of generating revenue. And so now, we look at the system we have in place today, and we say, what is it that we have? Because the Fugitive Slave Act, a fugitive is a slave, and a slave is a fugitive. Those words are synonymous with one another, right? We go to the 13th Amendment, the very amendment to the Constitution of the United States that we enacted and ratified, as a result of 1 million people dying in a war that we thought was all for the battle for equality. This was the amendment to the Constitution that was supposed to abolish slavery. And I'm going to tell you right now, it did nothing of the sort. Not only does it permit slavery, but it codified the legality of our foundational law because it doesn't say you can't have slavery. What it says is it says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist except as a punishment of crime. Yeah. And the moment that you say except, it means that you can have slavery. But we're going to call it justice here in America. So what we did was we simply took something, retitled it something different, changed it from a private institution to a public institution, and told America it doesn't exist anymore. But it does. It is absolutely within every single jurisdiction across America, and that's what's led to mass incarceration and the 800% increase in prison population. That's why America has 16 times more prisoners than the next closest industrialized nation. That's why we have 5% of the world's human population, but 26% of the world's prison population is because these states realized they can make tens of billions of dollars off the forced involuntary servitude of the weakest, most vulnerable in our society, and they do it under the auspice of justice by simply titling these people criminals. And so when you ask me, where did this come from? It came from an institution that of the first 28 justices that served on the United States Supreme Court, 22 of them owned their own slaves, right? These were men that had no desire or interest whatsoever in abolishing this institution. And they put into place rulings from the very beginning that have been undermining the Constitution of the United States, undermining the Union, because guess what? If the Constitution got its way, they'd all be out of a job because the Constitution declared that all men are to be free, and yet they're in the business of enslaving, imprisoning, and profiting off those illegal acts. So, we got to be honest with the institution. We got to be honest with the people that are there and put in that place that we call honorable. And we got to see that the reason why this indictment issue exists, and it's not just indictment. The indictment issue is what we're using to get into the court for a bigger argument. Yeah. But the reason why it exists is because the Supreme Court of the United States in 1887, they came out with a judicial ruling, Supreme Court did, and said, you know what? California had created its own law in its provision, in its constitution, and said, we're going to charge by information. Well, information is not an indictment. You see, an indictment goes in front of a grand jury, and that's 16 to 23 people that determine whether or not the state's case is valid. They determine probable cause to assume that a crime has been committed. So the grand jury is there as a check on prosecutorial and judicial power. That's its purpose, is to be able to be an independent third party to review the state's accusations to make sure that innocence doesn't suffer here in America. That is its purpose. But what California said was, you know what? We're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to let a judge determine whether or not there's sufficient probable cause. So we're going to permit this officer to bring information in the form of an affidavit, present it to a judge and say, Judge, I'd like you to issue this arrest based upon a probable cause contained within this information. But when this happens, now you have a situation where the accused has no opportunity to be able to confront those hearsay accusations against them. And now you have a single-sided, wholly biased decisions being made by one single entity made up of lots of different parts, including the judge, the prosecutor, law enforcement, CPS. They're all part of the body of the state, and yet it's the state that's coming against you. State of Washington versus Bob. State of Oklahoma versus Tom. State of Massachusetts versus Bill. They are all state versus you, and then you wonder why you don't have a fair and just proceeding. You wonder why you can't win, or why innocence is suffering here in prison. You wonder why. It's because every single bit of that system is all stacked against you as opposing party, and that's what happens with information. You see, information sets up what's called a trial by affidavit. And at common law, an affidavit is considered truth. And in fact, this affidavit is being presented as truth because that officer is bringing it forward, and they're saying this information is factual, truthful, and correct, right? And yet they weren't even a witness to it. They collected evidence from some other person, and then they're recording it as though it's factual, truthful, and correct. They're presenting under their own oath. And remember, under the Fourth Amendment, no warrant shall be issued but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation. And yet when the oath comes from someone that wasn't even a witness, well, now we have a whole other issue of Fourth Amendment violations where the warrants themselves are not valid. But nonetheless, this sets up a trial by affidavit. Now, trial by affidavit goes back to the history of our country, starting in 1628, stamp tax. This was one of the founders' greatest concerns, early on in our country. But it creates what's known as an irrebuttable presumption of guilt. Now, an irrebuttable presumption of guilt is the presumption that you are guilty based upon the mere fact of being charged with a crime. So you're being charged, you're being deprived of certain liberties, you're being your rights to be able to make money, to be able to enjoy your property, to be able to take care of your family. These are all things that were protected by the Constitution, and yet you're being deprived of them based upon someone saying that you committed a crime, and thus you're being deprived of those. Without due process, because here in America, up until 2001, 2002, the investigative detainments was unconstitutional. You could not arrest someone and hold them over while government investigated and took you to your case. No, you got to be found guilty before your liberty can be deprived of you. And yet here we are in this post September 11th world that is absolutely 100% taking away your freedoms without due.
That's something that I can testify to directly in my own experience with the system over, 40 some odd years, hitting a teenager and then becoming involved in the system in one way or another. And knowing that as a teenager, I was able to go before a judge and make my own argument against claims that were made against me by the state, by police. And I had almost no problem doing that. Nothing was forced on me. I wasn't forced to take an opinion, a counselor, anything else. It was just the base claim. And I was able to show this claim was false. This claim was not true. And therefore, this case is invalid. Fast forward 20 years later, past this point that you're talking about, early 2000s, and you get involved in the system again, and it's entirely different. You're forced to actually become a prisoner of the system, in the system, while you go through this 6, 7, 8, 9 month process of them trying to decide whether or not they have the evidence to actually convict you of a crime. And they shuffle you around. They tell you that you can't do things, and that if you do some things, that you'll be in trouble and that you'll be yanked back into the system, and that'll reflect on the current case that you have in the system. There hasn't been for a long time, and I think that you're absolutely right. Within the past 20 years, within my lifetime, 25 years, you can see a fundamental shift in our system. Even though, when I asked you when you thought it started, obviously this is something that goes all the way back to the beginning, but I have this interesting a period that I've noted in history that the paperwork is there to explain it. You mentioned the Bill of Rights, and while the Bill of Rights is a part of the Constitution, it's also a very obviously separate document that has a different purpose to it. Those original 10, 12, whichever number we settle on, 10 apparently, they had an entirely different purpose. The Constitution, of course, is the rules for the operation of the federal system, whereas the Bill of Rights is the protections of the individuals that are subjects of the system or subject to the system. They hadn't got to being subjects of the system yet. We were still people. All those 10 amendments call us people. But by the time we get to number 11, the word people is gone, and all of a sudden we're citizens again. So we're constructs of the state, and that's where I think that we lost all of our standing. And that, of course, by the time you get to 13 and 14, we're not just citizens. They've turned the word citizen into the word slave.
Yeah. And so you're right. A lot of people, one thing that a lot of people don't understand is, where do your rights come from, right? Because everybody says, oh, well, they come from God. Well, that's true, but you have to understand how rights work within our system of government. You have to, because if you ever want to win a civil rights case, this is the most fundamental, most important thing to understand, is that according to the doctrine of duties and rights, rights always derive from another's duty to act. Where there is no duty, there cannot be a right. Now, there are duties that exist that don't have a corresponding right, such as duty to God, duty to spouse, or duty to country. I have no rights that exist for my duty to obey God, right? That I'm not entitled to anything. I have an obligation and a duty to obey God, but I don't have any rights that derive from that obligation. But there are no rights that exist without a corresponding duty. And if people don't understand this particular issue or this particular fact, then they can never win a civil rights case. So the reason why rights derive from another's duty to act is because a law is nothing more than the establishment of an obligation. Yeah. That's all it is. The law creates an obligation. Now, an obligation can be seen from two different perspectives. From the one bound, the obligation is a duty. From the one entitled, the obligation is a right. So every law creates an obligation or a duty for someone to do something or forbear from doing something. And the other is it protects, it preserves the right. Now, you have the right to live, right? We all have that right. But in order to enforce that, we had to create a law, right? And what that law says is, I have an obligation to not kill someone. I have an obligation to not steal from someone. I have an obligation to not assault someone. If I breach my obligation and I assault you, then your right to not be assaulted has been violated. But it is not violated, does not exist until someone breaks the law. And so therefore, to win a civil rights case, the first step is you must show that someone had a duty to act and they failed to fulfill that duty. So until you do that, then you have no right that's been violated. You have no standing for claiming the violation of a right. And that's where a lot of these judges and a lot of these public officials, this is where we get it wrong, is that they tell us, for instance, to go out to a judicial misconduct board and file your allegation with the judicial misconduct board. And they'll come back and say, oh, yes, that judge made an error or that judge made a mistake. Well, mistake and error is not a crime, right? Abridging a constitutional obligation is a crime, right? Perjury is a crime, right? Misconduct is a crime. But until we show that they had a obligation protected by the law and we hold them accountable for that breach of obligation, then we have no rise to injunctive relief. We have no rise to be able to claim that the rights been violated. And that's where most people get this wrong here, is that we've got to start with the first step. That's why, my background, I'm an advocate. I speak on behalf of others in legal matter. My education is in substantive law. I deal with law enforcement. I'm not an attorney. Attorneys deal with adjudicative law, the adjudication process. They learn about ordinances, statutes, customs, judgment rulings. They learn about all these laws that remove freedom, because that's what they're in the business of. Right. Remove freedom and making you into a criminal, right? I deal with the first part. I deal with nothing but the Constitution. My law degree had nothing but the Constitution. That's all I did. But I'm law enforcement. So I deal with the first half, building a case against criminals, and we built a pretty massive case here because we could show that every public official, be it a prosecuting attorney, be it a judge, law enforcement, CPS, they're all acting in violation of their oaths, in direct violation of the Constitution of the United States, because when a state does rely upon an inferior provision of a constitution to deprive a person of right that's guaranteed by the Constitution, they just committed a crime. It's called deprivation of rights under color of law, Title 18, subsection 2.2. So, deprivation of rights under color of law says that any person who, under the color of any state statute, ordinance, custom, or regulation, deprives any person of any rights secured by the Constitution, commits that crime. So when a prosecutor, right, relies upon this inferior state law that says you don't have to do what the Constitution of the United States says, it's up to that prosecutor to determine which law they're supposed to obey. And when you have an oath that you've sworn fidelity with to the Constitution of the United States, and you choose to rely upon an inferior state law that permits you to abridge or to break the superior law, then you're a criminal, right? And what you just did was unconstitutional. Therefore, whatever you produce from that unconstitutional act will also be unconstitutional. You know, as long as the judicial branch, the Supreme Court of the United States, as long as they have a ruling that's in place that says states you do not have to do, or courts, you don't have to have an indictment by a grand jury, such as they did in 1887 with Hurtado versus California, when they came out and made that ruling and said, yes, state of California, you can do something different than what the Constitution of the United States says you must do. What happened there was that the Supreme Court, highest court in the land, they removed the constitutional provision, Clause 1 of Amendment 5, that says you must have it. They put in place
precedent.
Right. They put in place their ruling, and they called it case law, erroneous.
Stare-dices or whatever.
And thus they amended the Constitution of the United States in other than lawful manner, and that means that they directed all the courts within the purview of the United States, you don't have to follow the Constitution. And by the introduction of that fraud right there in 1887, there isn't still a court that's been acting constitutionally, because until that court steps up and corrects that ruling and puts the correct procedure, which is you must follow the Constitution, then everything they do is going to be unconstitutional, because they all derive from the fraud committed by that highest court in land introduced in 1887 and directed all the courts of the country to not follow the Constitution.
Well, they really are really good at destroying the value of words. They turn slaves into citizens, and they turn everything into a crime, whereas a crime should be the actual violation of a person or property by another person, and that should be a crime, and that's it. That should be the definition of crime, and anything else is some other thing other than a crime. It's not. It must fall somewhere else. It falls under statute. It falls under codes. It falls under all these other little manipulations that are just revenue generators ultimately.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That's one of the things I'm trying to draw a line between, is that there's a difference between dangerous behavior and aberrant behavior. Yeah. You know, aberrant behavior is someone stole a TV, right? You don't treat aberrant behavior in the same way that you would treat dangerous behavior. Dangerous behavior is one thing, but we know that the top criminologists in the world, right, all across the country or all across the world, they agree that only about 4% of the prison population here in America are dangerous. The rest of them aren't dangerous. The rest of them are aberrant behavior. You know, we know that right now today, 78% of people in prison are there that never even hurt anyone at all except for themselves. Drug-related offenses. We know that the majority of the rest are property-related crimes. Property-related crimes has nothing to do with the victim. That's aberrant behavior. And you deal with that by leading them in a lawful direction. So as long as our leaders are extorting, right, or as long as our leaders are embezzling from the Social Security Act so they can funnel money out to Ukraine, or, as long as our leaders are acting criminally, then we're not leading the people in a good direction. Therefore, don't expect to not see aberrant behavior, because guess what, leaders? You're causing it. You're leading them in that direction. If you don't want aberrant behavior, then don't do it yourself, right? We're tired of the criminals that are leading us, and we're going to say that either one, you stop committing crimes and you obey the will of the people, the established code of conduct that's agreed upon, or everything that you produce, government, is going to be illegal. Because when you act unlawfully, right, then what you produce is unlawful. You cannot have a lawful outcome derived from your criminal acts. So as long as our government are criminals acting outside of the law, then what they produce is unlawful, period. And so they really need to take a look at this and decide, is this what we want to be remembered as? Because I'll tell you what, there's enough people that are waking up right now across this country that we're not going to put up with this much longer, right? The oppressive, tyrannical acts of our government that is in direct defiance of the will of the people, that is in violation of the very laws that create their office and grant them authority, right? The people are aware that you guys are leading us toward criminality. Therefore, don't hold the people accountable for the crimes they commit when they follow you, government. You're responsible. Lead us in a good direction. If you can't do that, then maybe you're not in the right position. Maybe you're not the right person for that job, because leader's not a criminal. Criminals aren't leaders. So we want to make sure that we start at the top. We go and we get leaders that are going to lead our country in a lawful direction, out of love, faith, obedience, respect for the people, the laws they put forward. Until we do, there's nothing that this government's going to do that's going to be lawful. All right?
Have you been able to get in front of a judge who, 10 minutes ago would have said you're completely full of it, and convince him that he's wrong, that he's been doing it wrong all this time? Do you see any bright spots in this little adventure like that?
So yeah. We do. Not very often, but I'm going to tell you right now, United States Supreme Court, we got Justice Gorsuch. Justice Gorsuch has agreed, right? Justice Gorsuch is publicly telling people that he agrees. Not directly naming, my name, but he's agreeing. Because we submitted our writ to the United States Supreme Court on September 29th, 2023, right? And this writ was all about the fact that, hey, man, these people that are in prison across the country, they're illegally and unconstitutional because these courts are proceeding on something that's not law and determine the outcome. You cannot rely upon a judge-made ruling to deprive a person of right guaranteed by the Constitution, because that judge-made ruling is not law, right? So what happened then was we submitted our writ on September 29, 2023. Then on November 11th, Justice Gorsuch, United States Supreme Court, issues a judicial notice to every single federal judge across the country. And in that judicial notice, what he says most of the people in prison across America are there illegally and unconstitutionally because the courts are proceeding under administrative law and not common law. He went on to say that most of the children that are being taken from their families are being done illegally and unconstitutionally because the courts are proceeding under administrative law and not common law. And then he added a third element, and he said that most of the property is being taken from the people of the United States being done illegally and unconstitutionally because the courts are proceeding under administrative law and not common law. You guys, you can all go out. You can get that memo. It's available. You can find it. We have a copy of it. Everybody's aware of this memo. That was on November 11th, right? A couple months after I submitted our submission to the Supreme Court, identifying the fact that judges do not create law, right? Now, he also came out with a book early last year, around March. It was released. It was called Overruled. And now he's going around the country doing media interviews and press conferences about this book. And to understand what he's getting at in that memo, what is the difference between administrative law and not common law? You got to look at the three branches of government, okay, and their functions, their role. The first branch, Article 1, is all legislative powers vested in Congress of the United States. That is the legislative branch. The legislative branch is there to legislate. They create law. That's all they do. Anything that has to do with law, the legislative branch is responsible for it. So creating, amending, destroying law must be done by the first branch of government. And remember, guys, people were only impacted by the law, right? Because we, the people, give the government the power to govern through the consent of the government. Our consent comes from the representative individuals we put into place to represent us, regardless of whether they're doing it right. That's the way it was designed to be. So all legislative powers vested in the first branch of government, legislative branch. Now, the second branch of government is the executive branch, Article 2. Article 2 identifies, and what the executive branch does is the executive branch is there to enforce the laws, enforce them, right? They don't create law, they create ruling or orders, right? Executive orders. But remember, guys, orders don't affect the people because the judge is a servant to the people. Therefore, orders only affect those that can be ordered, people within the executive branch. He can only order them, right? So an executive order, don't get mixed up. They don't affect the people. They only affect those that the president can order, which are the people within his branch, right? That's it, okay? So he orders them. But what we saw over the summer here was the Chevron ruling, right? And June 26th, we had the Chevron ruling, which was basically the Supreme Court of the United States telling the executive branch that, hey, you don't get to create law. Because what was happening was that, but the executive branch was finding ambiguity in the law, right? They were thinking that, oh, it's not clear what we're supposed to do. Therefore, we're going to write policy, and then we're going to go out and enforce that policy against the people, right? To clarify the ambiguity in the law. Right. And so on June 28th of this last year, we had the Supreme Court come out and technically overrule this Chevron ruling and said, oh, no, executive branch, you don't get to create law. If you're not clear on the law, if it's ambiguous to you, then you must go back to the branch government that has constituted authority to be able to amend the law, because if you amend it, executive branch, then what you created is unconstitutional, right? And when you go out and try to enforce something that's not constitutional against the people because you call it policy, then that's unconstitutional. So the second branch government can only create orders. They cannot create law. They cannot amend it. Only the legislative branch can do that. Now, the third branch government, under Article 3, is the judicial branch, right? Now, the purpose of the judicial branch is to administer the laws. They are the administrative branch of government. They are there to administer the laws. And the administrative branch, all they do is they create rulings, judge-made rulings. But a ruling is not law either, right? Judges cannot create law either. They create rulings, and the only people that are affected by rulings are those that can be ruled over. Judges. Judges are the only ones that rulings apply to, not the people. But when the executive or when the judicial branch creates a ruling and erroneously call it law, believing that they have the power to create law, that's called administrative law. So what Justice Gorsuch was getting at there was he said most of the people in prison here in America are there illegally and unconstitutionally because the courts are relying upon judge-made rulings and not the Constitution in determining the outcome of that dispute. Brother, that's my argument. That's what we submitted to the court on September 29, 2023. That is exactly what my whole argument is. And Justice Gorsuch is going around the country right now telling everybody that I'm right. Now, whether or not
that seems like a big one to get. I mean, that's just not Judge Smith down the road there. That's a pretty big get.
It's huge, but here's the problem that I have is that Justice Gorsuch, he has the ability to sign the writ that I submitted on September 29th. He has the ability to correct this. If he believes that this is wrong, like he does, like he says within these press conferences where he's calling all the judges across the country all criminals because they're all violating your oath. Mm-hmm. Well, if you really believe that, Justice Gorsuch, then you would sign the writ that I submitted to you on September 29th because it only requires one signature, right? But if you're just going to go around the country and tell all these judges that they're criminals, but you're not going to have the backbone and courage and integrity to actually do something about it, then I'm going to say you're kind of a liar, Gorsuch. You're kind of being untruthful. You're kind of bullshit. Because at least the other 8 justices haven't admitted that I'm right. You admitted it. And therefore you are knowingly and willingly permitting this to continue because you're in charge of all those judges. So instead of going around the country and saying you're all criminals, I would suggest that you just step up, do the honorable thing, and sign the writ that was delivered to you on September 29th, 2023 on the case Tanawah Downing versus the state of Washington. And if you do not, then you know what? You have admitted that you're aware of crimes that are being committed by your agents. And under the laws of criminal conspiracy for public officials, any person who, having knowledge of any of the wrongs conspire to be done and who have the power to prevent or aid in the prevention of the commission of same, neglects or refuses to do so, may be joined and suspends the action. Justice Gorsuch, you made it abundantly clear that you're aware of these crimes that are being committed. And I don't think that there's a single jury in the whole country that I wouldn't be able to find 12 people that would agree that you could have done something about this instead of just traveling around the country talking about the issue and actually not stepping up and doing something about the issue because it only requires one signature of one justice to correct the unlawful criminal acts of the agents that work for the judicial branch. And if you're not willing to do that, then I'm going to say that you're engaged in it, and I will absolutely include you as a defendant in the action. And we're going to hold you accountable for the treason that you're committing by every single judge to continue to commit crimes against people in the United States by failing to follow the very simple procedures and processes codified in the Constitution of the United States for the adjudication of crime.
So you got to find that guy. It's interesting that you have this person who admits all that but doesn't seem to have the the balls, the cojones to do what's right about it. It's interesting that that's actually a thing, that it can be so obvious and so clearly stated, and yet not going to make the effort to do anything to change it. Is there any chance that he doesn't realize he can do something about it?
I don't care.
Okay,
because,
fair enough.
So the thing about it is that if you're going to call yourself a leader, if you're going to call yourself honorable, right, then leaders step up and they lead, right? And that means lead your people in a lawful direction.
Tough decisions.
Because for 243 years, that institution has been covering up the crimes being committed by their own agents. So I honestly don't care. But what I can say is that when we have a body of men known as the Supreme Court, made up of 9 people, right, 9 justices, when one of those justices step out and say, I'm aware of crimes that are being committed, then I don't care if the other 8 haven't admitted it yet. They did through that one. Right? And we have a book that was written by Justice Gorsuch that's out there that everyone can read right now today. And it says in that book, under the CPS section, it says that most of the children that are being taken, right, or most of the parents are being threatened and intimidated to giving up their child, right, by CPS agents. Say it right within the CPS section. In the criminal section, he says that most prosecutors are threatening and intimidating defendants in order to get them to enter into contract of guilt. I mean, these are statements that he says right in that book, and that word "threaten" is extremely important because anytime you use threats or intimidation to formulate a contract, that contract is illegal. Duress and any contract that's formulated based upon duress is actually a crime of extortion. But we'll
next step. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. It's good. This is it's nice to know that all these things that you believe to be true about our system are true, even if they're sad truths, because it means that there is something more than what we have going on now. There's some light at the end of the tunnel that suggests that this could theoretically be turned back into a nation of individual people who just happen to come together to, for the things that the defense, the national defense, and things like that. But otherwise, that we're all individuals and that we're not. We're at liberty to do whatever we want as long as we don't violate other people and their property.
Absolutely, right. Absolutely. I mean, and that was the whole point, is that as long as we're not harming someone else, we have the freedom to live our life. We have the freedom to develop our faculties to become the person we are meant to be. But that freedom and becoming that person derives from our freedom to be able to do the things we need to do. And so when government criminalizes every single thing within our world so that they can make money off it because it becomes a commercial transaction, well, we don't have the freedom to be able to become that person because, the whole American dream, it goes away. That was one of the things I said within my oral arguments to the Supreme Court is that it's the ability to visualize the dream of one's future and the power to then manifest such a dream. But success and failure is upon the individual and not the government. Limitations come simply from a person's inability to dream or the sins of oppression. You see, we can't dream about our future when we're oppressed, and the freedoms that we need to be able to envision that future becomes something that we're not able to do because our system doesn't give us the freedom to be able to develop those faculties.
You must have really enjoyed talking to Roy Colin.
What's that?
You must have really enjoyed talking to Roy Colin.
Roy Coleman, I don't know who that is.
Colin. Just here, you were just on his show just a couple of days ago, I think.
Rory, Bad Dad?
Yeah, Canadian, right? Or
okay, no, that was Awaken podcast. Yeah, Awaken.
Yeah. You're talking about corrupt criminal courts and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
It could be because he's not in America, so he has a different story. But it's not. It's the same story. They're doing the exact same thing. It's not like America is special. Our judicial system isn't particularly different from others. In fact, if you go and look at sort of protections and documents and things on paper that are supposed to be for individuals, America lacks a whole bunch of protections and rights that other places don't have under the law.
Yeah. I mean, to say that we're the freest nation in the country or in the world, absolutely insane.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely to be taken with a grain of salt. I think again that the only thing that's true about that is the potential for it is to be able to look at our system and suggest that our system wasn't set up to be the way it is now. That our system was more about again protecting property, about protecting individuals, and now it's about the system is protecting itself. That's all it's doing. It's all it's doing. It sets its own precedents so that it validates itself. It's circular.
Right. But remember, so precedent is an English bar issue, right? So in England, all the laws made by the king, right? They have a monarchy. So the king makes the laws. Therefore, the king, what he did was he granted his agents, the judges, the authority to be able to speak the law as well. Therefore, in England, under the English bar, precedence has a place. Stare decisis has a place. Because in England, the judges do speak the law because the monarch, the king, has permitted them and granted that authority.
Interesting point.
Precedence has no place because here in America, we do not delegate the authority for the judicial branch.
Well, every case is supposed to be adjudicated on its own merits. That's the point. And
based on procedures of the Constitution, right?
Yeah.
Well, people. So we have a procedurally based system, not a common law based system, because common law says, okay, that judge-made ruling dictates the future outcome, right? So, that is an English jurisdoctrine value. It's not an American jurisprudence. So here in America, the judges do not speak the law because we did not delegate that authority. It's a separation of powers issue. We have a procedurally based system that's based upon procedures. And this goes back to what I was saying about the trial by affidavit. Because here in America, what happens is that it sets up the irrebuttable presumption of guilt, right? And irrebuttable presumption of guilt, again, is the presumption that you're guilty based upon the mere facts.
You've been charged. They said you're guilty. The cops were there. They saw it.
Oh, yeah.
15 minutes later, but...
Right. But what happens here is that now the defendant has to go out and collect evidence in order to prove that they're innocent. This is a shift in the burden of proof. We all believe it's a system that the prosecutor must find you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That's what we believe, right? That's what we've been told. That's the American principles. But with an irrebuttable presumption of guilt, that's no longer true. Now there's a shift in the burden of proof, and now the defendant has to go out and collect evidence in order to prove that they're innocent. And according to Blackstone, this shift in the burden of proof, it occurs when the system focuses on speed and efficiency instead of established processes. We were a procedurally based justice system, but now we have in place a system that focuses on how many people we push through this system, how many people can find guilty based upon the threats, intimidation, coercion, and duress that we inflict upon them through a proceeding that isn't even valid because it's called a plea bargain and not a trial by jury.
Fiction. Yeah.
Everything about this is a lie. Everything about this is inconsistent with what the people put into place, the laws that we established. And it's about damn time that this system owns up to the criminal acts that have been committed by their agents their entire existence. Because once again, judges, you don't get to make the law, and you certainly don't get to amend the Constitution of the United States so you can increase the production and the enslavement of these people in these for-profit institutions that we call sweatshop in China, but a prison here in America.
Yeah, no, we have them here in America. Yeah, they're just legalized. That's the difference between it. It's all made legal, not lawful, but legal, and it's all just a little bit of a game of words. And if you don't know the right words, you stand no chance inside the system. A normal person anymore, and then you have to rely on somebody that their livelihood is dependent upon their following the rules within the system to be able to try to help you defend yourself from the system that's come after you.
Yeah.
It's an amazing catch-22 that we really have going on. We have about 8 minutes left to fill. Is there anything that you haven't hit on yet? People need to know. You want to drop the web address, certain things that they might look for when they get to the website that they can help out with. Anything that's going to get you, one more body on the ground.
Yeah. So 9 years ago, I was on the other side, guys. Right. I was supporting government. I was high up in national security. I was designing deploying systems. It was focused on how do we protect government from the people. Right. This notion that we call Homeland Security. But I came to understand that Homeland Security is nothing more than code word for domestic terrorism. You don't protect government from the people. You protect the people from government. So I was on the wrong side. And so the things I was doing, the procedures I was putting into place, the policies and technology that I was advocating, I was on the wrong side. And I had to at a minimum address those. But when I realized that, that I was leading my children in this wrong direction, that my son, he was looking at me as his hero, and that I was not doing what was right. I was violating the very oath that I took, the promise I made to people in the United States to protect them and protect the Constitution, that I was in violation of it. Then I had to do something about this, right? So this has been a journey for me personally to address the things that my ignorance and to fix those. And in doing so, I can also lead my children in the proper direction. I made the decision 9 years ago that I was going to do this for free, that regardless of whether there's money, the people that are in prison, the people that are being oppressed, the reason why they're being oppressed is because they don't have money. Only poor get oppressed. Only the poor get their rights taken from them. So I was going to continue to do this regardless of whether there was money in it or not, because it was the right thing to do, because I need to lead my children in the right direction. If my son's going to look up to me as his hero, I damn well better go out and do something heroic. And if I'm going to be proud of the man that he becomes, I must first be proud of the man that he emulates. For my daughters, if they're going to look at me as the example of who it is that they're going to give their hearts to, then I damn well better be the type of man that I would approve of them. And so this is me creating that image for them, setting that example for them. But at the same time, God is gifting me with the privilege of being able to help my country, a lot of people in the process.
That's pretty cool.
On the website, right, Tanawah, www.tanawah.com, TANAWAH.com. From there, you'll be able to find two main things. Now, if you guys want to learn about me and my background, you guys are more than welcome to do it, right? I throw everything out there. I have nothing to hide. I want you guys to know about my history. I want you guys to know about where I'm at today and the reason why I made these decisions, because it's important that we all act in the best way, best example we can. And so I'm trying to do that, set that example for my children. And, so if you guys want to know anything about me, it's all available right there. I don't hide anything. You guys want press release information? You guys want to submit my information to your local news station? By all means, it's all right there. It's available on that website. But another thing is there's an affidavit form. You can download an affidavit. Now, this is an affidavit that's specifically for the absence of the indictment by grand jury. So if you're charged by or convicted of or charged with or convicted of a crime by the United States justice system or system subjected to the jurisdiction thereof, that would be any state justice system, then you can submit one of these affidavits to me, right? What we're doing right now is we're compiling a massive number of these. I'm going around the country and I'm serving these state attorney generals and state Supreme Courts. In fact, I'm right here in Rhode Island, getting ready to go to Maine and do Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire. That's going to get us to, I believe, 46 of the states, lower 48 has been served. We're way along on this, but we still have 4 left. But we're here because we need to get these states served. But nonetheless, what we're doing is we're compiling a list, a group of 500,000 criminal affidavits on behalf of victims that have had these crimes committed against them by agents of government. And that's the final blow to this court. Once I finish serving all these states, providing notice to the highest executive and highest judicial officer within these states, once I finish doing that, we're going to return to the Supreme Court of the United States with those 500,000 criminal affidavits on behalf of victims that are actual crimes committed by their agents under their watch. We're going to ask them, what is it that you want to do about the Supreme Court? Because these are crimes that you're responsible for. These are crimes that are being committed by your agents across the country in violation of the Constitution of the United States. And you can either choose to step up and do the honorable thing and hold your agents criminally liable for the crimes they commit, or at a minimum, at least direct them to act in a lawful constitutional manner. And if you don't want to, then once again, any person who, having knowledge of any of the wrongs conspired to be done and who have the power to prevent or aid in the prevention of the commission of same, neglects or refuses to do so, may be joined and spends the action. Upon returning to Washington, D.C. and delivering these to the United States Supreme Court, they're not going to pretend like they didn't know any longer. They're not going to be able to pretend like they're not responsible for it. No, you guys are in charge of every single judge across the country. And if you're unwilling to correct their behavior and direct them to act in a constitutional manner, then what you're going to have to do, Supreme Court, is you're going to have to tell 330 million people that they believe in is not real, that you're not going to obey it, that what they look up to every day for their lives and sustenance is not valid. And good luck getting home that night, because we're not in the world. So I would challenge the Supreme Court to go ahead and step up, discharge the duties of their office, fulfill the promises that they made to the people of the United States, and direct their agents to act in a lawful manner. Because if they don't, then I guarantee you that you guys will be the first 9 people heading the gallows. I promise you that. Thank you so much, brother.
No, that's fantastic. It's really great that you're out there doing this, because I don't think that there's a lot of people doing it. I know there's a lot of people talking about it, because this is something that I've understood myself for longer than you've been doing it. You said that 9 years ago you were on the other side of this thing. Well, 9 years ago I was still over here on this side where we're at. So yeah, there's people out here talking about it. They know about it. I think people knew about it maybe about 20 years ago, more so than they do today, because there was something about internet access and some things that were available, information that was available 20, 25 years ago that's kind of been scrubbed or has been pushed to they tried to bury it deep under other ideas, and so it's great to see that there actually is somebody out there with the wherewithal to be able to do something about it. You were in the right positions before, that you were trusted by the people that you worked with to know what your business is and to do what's right, and to see you realize when something changed, to make the right decision and to follow the moral path, the patriotic path, the right path for America, the right path for you as an individual and a father. It's just amazing. So it's really great getting a chance to talk with you. I really appreciate you taking the time.
I appreciate it.
And I wish you the best of luck out there, my friend.
I appreciate it. So if anybody, guys, I do this because it's right thing to do. I do this for free. If anybody is interested in supporting the cause, if you believe in the things I'm saying, you want to support this, back it up, we need all the help that we can get, right? This is not easy to be able to do it. I do have some donors that continue to make sure that I'm able to do the things I need to do. I focus on service, make sure I provide the best service possible. And if I do, then I know that you guys are going to make sure that I have resources I need to be able to be successful. We have Cash App, Chime, Venmo, PayPal. They're all exactly the same. You can donate through the website up at the top. It's We Shall Be Free, right? You go to the website, but each one of those, Cash App, Chime, Venmo, PayPal, is We Shall Be Free. That's WESHALLBEFREE. We operate under an only donation basis. None of the people that I serve, none of them have to pay for the service I provide. We're going to do this regardless of whether there's money in it or not.
I know you got some friends across this network, the network that I'm on the weekends that the show airs on originally, and then it goes out from there to the podcast sites and all of that. I guarantee you just made a lot of friends. So hopefully they can dig deep and help you and support the cause, and maybe some boots on the ground too, whatever. Thank you so much again for hanging out. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. God bless, guys.
That's awesome. All right.